They looked at you and saw nothing worth keeping. Not your loyalty, not your strength, not the way you would have gone to war for them without thinking twice. You stood there, heart wide open, hands extended, offering everything you had, everything you were, and they didn't even blink. They didn't hesitate. They didn't choose you. They didn't see the fire beneath your skin, the storms you survived, the battles you fought just to show up whole. They turned their backs as if you were nothing but a whisper, as if your presence was something to walk past, not hold on to. You were the last one standing in a room that once echoed with promises, and when the lights went out, no one reached for you. No one stayed. They left you behind like a forgotten song, like a book they never finished reading. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not that they didn't choose you, but that they didn't even stop to understand what they were leaving. You remember it, don't you? That empty space where your name used to mean them's thing. That ache in your chest when you saw them laughing with the ones they picked instead. As if you were invisible, as if you never mattered at all. You started to question everything. Maybe you weren't enough. Maybe you were too much. Maybe the weight of your truth was too heavy for their shallow hand. So you tried to shrink yourself. You tried to be smaller, quieter, softer, hoping that if you just became easier to love, they'd finally see you. But they didn't. And every time you tried to light up their world, they walked away, leaving you with burned hands and an empty heart. You gave them warmth, and they traded you for cold comfort. They didn't choose you, and they were proud of that choice. Until silence began to speak louder than your words ever did. Until your absence became a ghost in their daily lives. Until they realized the comfort they chose couldn't hold a candle to the fire you carried in your soul. But in those first moments, in the wreckage of rejection, you didn't know any of that. All you knew was pain. Raw, silent, suffocating pain. The kind that doesn't scream, but sits inside your chest like a brick. You didn't cry out loud. You didn't tell the world. You just sank, quiet. And the world, it kept moving. You sat with that silence. You ate with it, slept with it, woke up with it. It became your only companion. You learned to smile with a cracked heart, to show up when you didn't even recognize the person in the mirror. And still, they didn't choose you. It wasn't just a romantic loss. It wasn't just a missed opportunity. It was the death of something sacred, the kind of betrayal that turns you into your own stranger. You started walking through life like a ghost, watching them live, watching them thrive, watching them celebrate the ones they chose instead. And every laugh you heard felt like a knife. Every moment they didn't look back felt like another reminder that you weren't enough to be remembered. But oh, how wrong they were. Because what they left behind wasn't weak. It wasn't broken. It wasn't disposable. It was a force in disguise. They thought they walked away from silence, but they walked away from a storm. They walked away from the very thing that would have changed everything. They walked away from truth, from power, from depth. And now they hate their choice. Because what they walked away from is becoming unstoppable. The pain didn't kill you. It created you. The silence didn't break you. It sharpened you. And the betrayal, it didn't define you. It awakened something ruthless inside. They didn't see it then, but they will. Because what they ignored is now undeniable. What they overlooked is now irreplaceable. And what they rejected is now rising, louder, stronger, and far beyond their reach. So let them regret. Let them wrestle with the echo of your absence. Let them live with the memory of what they chose to abandon. Because they didn't choose you. But you're about to become unforgettable. It didn't happen with a thunderclap. No dramatic storm, no lightning bolt to mark the shift. It was quieter than that. Almost too quiet. The kind of silence that creeps in when something sacred dies. But no one notices. That's how they left. That's how they turned away. 1 second, you were everything. The next, you were just standing there, watching their back grow smaller in the distance. Not with a goodbye, not with a reason, just a void. A sudden absence where love, loyalty, or recognition used to be. And you stood frozen, locked in the moment like time itself had betrayed you too. Your breath caught in your chest. Your mind screamed 1,000 things at once, but your lips couldn't form a single word. Why not me? That was the first thought that hit like a blade. Not because you were desperate for validation, but because you knew what you had given. You knew what you carried. You knew you had been real in a world addicted to fake. And still, they walked. You weren't just confused. You were shattered in a way that didn't make a sound, the kind of break only the soul can understand. You kept rewinding the last conversation in your head, every glance, every word, every smile that now felt rehearsed. And still it made no sense. They told you once that you mattered, that they'd never leave, that no one could replace you. And yet, someone did. The silence after they turned away felt like a door slamming shut, one you didn't even realize was closing. You reached for it, hoping to catch it before it locked, but it was too late. The lock had clicked, the light had gone out, and you were left standing in the dark. Metaphors flooded your mind because logic couldn't explain this kind of pain. It felt like being a lighthouse in the middle of a storm, and still they sailed away from your light, like being a book filled with truth, and they chose to read the lie instead. You were a garden they once admired, now overgrown with weeds of abandonment and silence. They didn't just walk away from you. They walked away from everything you stood for, from your loyalty, your consistency, your quiet strength, and you were left with the echo of their footsteps, asking yourself what made you so easy to leave behind. Was it your honesty, your vulnerability? Was it the way you gave without holding back? Maybe you were too deep for shallow heart. Maybe your presence demanded too much truth in a world built on illusion. Or maybe, just maybe, they were never worthy of you to begin with. But try telling that to a broken heart. Try convincing the mirror that you weren't the problem when all it reflects is emptiness. You scrolled through old messages, reread the words they once said, promises now hollow, laughter now bitter, and your mind couldn't make peace with it. Because how does someone go from calling you home to treating you like a stranger? How do they just forget? The truth is, they didn't forget. They chose, and that choice wasn't a mistake. It was a decision, a cold one, a deliberate one, and that's what hurt the most. They looked at you and decided you weren't worth the effort. You weren't worth the fight. You weren't worth staying for. So you stood in that moment, watching everything you believed in vanish into a memory that played on loop in the theater of your mind, each time stabbing a little deeper. And the worst part, no one around you even noticed. You had to pretend. You had to act like you were okay. You had to smile while drowning, laugh while bleeding. And you did, because what choice did you have? You learned to walk through life with a mask, one that looked like strength but was held together by tape and silence. You laughed in public but cried in the shower. You gave the world your best while secretly feeling like your best had never been enough. They had taken the most precious parts of you and discarded them like scraps, and still you stayed silent. That was the betrayal. Not just that they left, but that they did so without looking back, without hesitation, without guilt. You used to think you'd get closure, that maybe one day they'd come back with an explanation, an apology, something to stitch the wound. But all you got was distance. All you got was cold. The people you would have fought for left you to fight your own demons alone. The ones you would have burned for watched you freeze. And somehow, you still held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd realize what they lost. But they never did. Not then. They were too busy basking in the glow of the new, the shallow, the easy. Replacing you was effortless, and watching them move on so quickly, that was a new kind of pain. A pain that didn't just break your heart, it questioned your worth. If you were so easy to forget, did you ever matter at all? Of course you did. But pain doesn't let logic in, and so you kept walking with that wound, with the memory of the moment they turned away carved into your soul, like a scar that never quite fades, a scar that whispers in the dark. Remember when you gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. You remember the way the room went quiet when they left, the way your world stopped spinning, the way even your reflection looked confused. Who are you now without them? What's left of you when someone walks away with pieces you never got back? You remember the shame, not because you were weak, but because you let yourself believe you were finally seen. You let your guard down. You let yourself love, trust, open, and they punished you for it. But let this be said clearly. You were not the weak one. You were the real one. The one who showed up with heart. The one who stayed when it was hard. The one who carried love like armor and still gave it away freely. And they couldn't handle that kind of fire. So they ran. They didn't choose you. Not because you lacked something, but because you had too much depth, too much loyalty, too much truth. And truth terrifies people who live in lies. So let them go. Let them drown in the shallowness they chose. Let them pretend they're content. Because no matter how far they run, they will always remember the moment they turned away. And one day, oh, one day, it will haunt them. Because what they left behind wasn't broken. It was becoming dangerous. It was becoming untouchable. It was becoming you. And they'll never be able to undo that moment. Never be able to walk it back. Never be able to unchoose you. Their choice is their curse. And your rise, that will be the storm they never saw coming. After they turned away, the world didn't pause. Number it spun faster, as if mocking your stillness. Everyone else kept laughing, living, moving forward, while you stood there, shattered, stuck in a loop that no one could see. Time betrayed you. It refused to wait. It dragged the days forward while you drowned in the seconds. You weren't just alone. You were abandoned in plain sight. People passed by your pain like it was invisible. You smiled with cracked lips, nodded with hollow eyes, but inside, everything screamed. Your thoughts echoed too loudly in your own skull. It felt like living in a glass box, seeing everything, touching nothing, hearing the world through thick walls, muffled, muted, distant, and in that silence, doubt began to whisper. It didn't shout. Doubt is quieter than that, more dangerous. It comes like a thief in the night, soft, calculated. It doesn't ask permission. It slithers into your mind and starts planting lies, watered by every unanswered question. Maybe you weren't enough. Maybe they saw something in you and didn't like it. Maybe you were the problem after all. You stared at your reflection and couldn't recognize the face in the mirror. The light was gone. Your eyes didn't shine the same. Your smile didn't lift your spirit anymore. You used to carry hope like a fire in your chest, but now it was just smoke. Cold, gray smoke rising from something that used to be alive. The silence was the loudest thing in your life. It followed you everywhere. It clung to your clothes. It echoed in empty rooms. It slept beside you, ate with you. It didn't leave when the sun rose. It didn't fade with time. It stayed, like a shadow you couldn't outrun. There were moments when you almost forgot how to speak. What would you say anyway? Who would even listen? Everyone was too busy, chasing dreams, chasing people, chasing noise. But you were chasing the pieces of yourself, trying to gather the shards before you bled out completely. You tried to explain it once, the emptiness, the confusion, the ache that never really left your chest. But your words fell flat. People don't understand what they haven't felt. They think sadness is a season. They think healing is a straight line. They don't see the war that rages inside of you just to get out of bed. You walked through life like a ghost, alive but not living, breathing but not feeling. Every step felt heavier than the last. Every smile felt more like a lie. You became a master of disguise, a performer on a stage that no one cared to watch. And every night, the curtain fell, only for you to cry in the dark where no one clapped, no one cared. You wanted to scream, not just cry, not just vent, but scream from the depths of your soul, loud enough to shatter the silence, loud enough to make someone, anyone, turn around and say, "I see you." But the world doesn't hear the broken. It only listens to the polished. It applauds strength, but turns away from struggle. So you stopped screaming. You swallowed the sound. You buried it deep inside where the pain could rot in peace. And still, you kept waking up. That was the strange part. You kept waking up, even when you didn't want to. Even when your body felt like lead and your spirit felt like dust, you kept rising. Not because you were strong, but because survival had become your only language. And in that numbness, you learned silence more intimately than most will ever know. Silence became your partner, your witness. It knew all your secrets. It saw all the nights you wanted to give up. It watched as you held your breath through tears no one would ever see. It listened to your thoughts spiral into places too dark for words. But here's what silence didn't know. You were changed. In the depths of that isolation, something was forming, slowly, quietly. A new version of you was being carved from the wreckage. The part of you that no longer needed applause, no longer begged for love, no longer waited to be chosen. But back then, you didn't feel power. You only felt empty. You'd sit in rooms full of people and still feel alone. You'd talk, but not be heard. You'd laugh, but not feel joy. You tried to distract yourself. Music, movies, scrolling endlessly, but nothing filled the void. Nothing could replace what was taken from you. You missed yourself. You missed the person you were before the heartbreak, before the betrayal, before the silence. You missed your innocence, your belief in people, your wide-open heart. You missed trusting without fear, giving without regret, loving without conditions. But pain changes things. It changes people, and it had changed you. You were no longer the same. The world moved on, and you were frozen in place, watching everyone else thrive while you simply existed. And that hurt more than anything, being stuck in a moment while the rest of the world ran laps around you. You kept wondering, when does this end? When does the numbness go away? When does the sadness stop choking your chest at 2 a.m.? When do you finally look in the mirror and see something worth saving? You waited for answers, but silence doesn't speak. It only watches. It only listens. And in that stillness, you discovered something strange, something unexpected, a faint pulse beneath the weight, a flicker of something in your chest that refused to die. You couldn't name it. You couldn't explain it, but it was there. Maybe it was your soul refusing to be forgotten. Maybe it was your fire learning to burn in the cold. Maybe it was you refusing to be erased. Whatever it was, it stayed, even in the darkest nights, even when you couldn't feel it. It stayed, like an ember buried under ash, waiting for air, waiting for a reason to rise. But that came later. For now, you still lived in the silence, still walked the halls of your mind like a haunted house, still fought the shadows that whispered lies. They left you. That was the truth. They left you to drown in a silence they never had to face. They got to walk away clean. But you had to wrestle with the silence. You had to sit with the questions. You had to survive the emptiness. And you did. You're still here, even if you don't know how, even if you don't feel proud, even if you don't feel strong, you're still here. And that matters more than you know. Because the ones who rise from silence, they don't just speak, they roar. They didn't just leave you, they replaced you. And not with someone stronger, not with someone kinder, not with someone who would go to war for them like you did. They chose lesser. They chose the easy version, the version that didn't challenge them, the one that didn't bleed love, the one that didn't sacrifice sleep, the one that didn't dig deep to understand their soul. They picked someone convenient, and you watched it all unfold. Like a slow-motion car crash you couldn't stop, like watching your own worth get thrown into the fire while they clapped for the sparkless ashes they replaced you with. You gave them your all, and still they looked elsewhere. Still they convinced themselves that less was more. That smile they wear now, it's built on your silence. That peace they pretend to have, it was bought with your chaos. They stand tall today because you held them up for so long that they forgot how to stand on their own. But the truth is, they didn't want depth. They wanted decoration. They didn't want someone who saw into their wound. They wanted someone who smiled at the mask and never asked what was underneath. You were too real for their illusions, too intense for their comfort, too honest for their lies. So they ran, not because you were lacking, but because you saw too much, felt too deeply, loved too hard, gave too much of yourself in a world that rewards shallowness. You watched them walk into the arms of someone who never knew the weight they carried, because they didn't want healing, they wanted hiding. They didn't want someone who confronted the storm with them. They wanted someone who would dance in the rain and pretend the sky was clear. And what did you get? Nothing. Just silence, just questions, just the ache of knowing you were the better choice but still weren't the chosen one. It's a wound few understand. To give everything you are, time, love, truth, patience, only to be passed over like you were too much effort, only to be forgotten like a fading song in the back of their playlist. You watched them celebrate the person they picked as if you had never existed, as if your sacrifices didn't count, as if the nights you stayed up praying for their peace were just moments in passing. And yes, you felt rage. You felt the fire crawl into your chest and nest there. Because it's not just that they left, it's who they chose instead. Someone who never wept over their pain, someone who never lost sleep for their healing, someone who didn't know their story, didn't carry their burden, didn't love them like you did. And that sting, like salt in a wound that never got to close. Like being pushed off the stage after giving the performance of your life so they could give the spotlight to someone who never even rehearsed. You weren't just overlooked, you were discarded, replaced like a worn-out toy, like your loyalty had an expiration date, like your love had no value once it wasn't convenient. And what's worse, they smiled while doing it, like they were proud of the downgrade, like they were proud of choosing simplicity over sincerity. It wasn't fair, you know that, but life rarely is, and yet you stood there, watched, waited, wounded. You didn't scream, you didn't beg, you didn't chase, because deep down, even though it hurt like hell, even though it shattered your soul into 1,000 screaming pieces, you knew this. They weren't ready for the weight of your love, and instead of growing stronger to carry it, they walked away to someone lighter, to someone who wouldn't demand they grow, to someone who wouldn't expect them to rise. Because you required depth. You challenged them to face themselves, to evolve, to become. But they didn't want growth. They wanted comfort. And comfort is easier to find in shallow waters. So they settled. They pretended the pool they jumped into wasn't shallow. They told themselves it was peace, when it was really just quiet. They told themselves it was love, when it was just tolerable emptiness. And they called it happiness. They told everyone they were fine. They posted pictures, shared smiles, lived in a painted fantasy. But you knew, you always did, because the one who carries truth in their soul can always spot the lie. Let them pretend. Let them convince the world they made the right choice. Let them laugh loudly in public while they whisper doubt into their pillow at night. Because they will. Oh, they will. They'll remember what they walked away from. They'll remember the fire you carried, the loyalty you bled, the way you showed up even when you were breaking. And one day, they'll compare. They'll look at what they chose and realize it never burned the way you did, never loved the way you did, never held them through the darkness the way you did. And by then, it'll be too late, because you won't be standing there waiting anymore. You'll be becoming. You'll be building something that can't be replaced. You'll be standing in your own light, not begging to be chosen, but choosing yourself. And when they look back, they won't just regret walking away. They'll hate their own reflection for not seeing your worth when it was shining right in front of them. You were never the problem. You were the lesson they weren't ready to learn, so they chose lesser. And now, they'll live with less. You didn't just fall. You were pushed, then buried, beneath weight you never asked to carry, beneath silence that screamed louder than any war zone. And when you opened your mouth to cry for help, nothing came out. Just air, just ache, just absence. That's what it became, a life of absence, absent of color, absent of meaning, absent of light. You stopped living and started existing. moving through days like a ghost, trying to remember what it felt like to be human, what it felt like to smile without lying, what it felt like to wake up and not wish you hadn't. People said you were quiet, but you weren't quiet. You were screaming inside your silence, screaming in a language no one cared enough to learn. It wasn't just sadness. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was a kind of death the world doesn't see, a slow drowning in an ocean no one else believed existed. Because on the outside, you still stood up, you still walked, you still spoke. But inside you were curled in a corner, choking on memories, swallowed by shadows. You didn't want pity. You didn't even want attention. You just wanted the pain to make sense. You wanted to know why they did it, why they could look into your eyes, see your soul wide open, and still walk away like you meant nothing. You weren't okay, not then, not even close. You would lie in bed for hours, staring at ceilings that never blinked back, wrestling with thoughts that made your chest tighten and your breath vanish. And no one knew, because no one really asked. And even if they did, you learned to smile. You learned to say, "I'm fine," even while your insides screamed for mercy. The days blurred, the nights sharpened, the darkness whispered to you louder than anyone ever had. And a part of you, a dangerous part, started to listen. You began to believe you were the problem, that you were the broken one, that maybe you weren't enough after all. Because why else would they leave? Why else would they choose someone else? Why else would your phone stay silent while theirs lit up with praise and present? You became numb to music, to conversation, to food, to touch, to hope. It was like standing in a blizzard with no coat, no shelter, and no one coming to look for you. You stopped expecting rescue. You stopped expecting anything. That's what the darkness does. It doesn't show up like a storm. It seeps in like slow poison. One ignored emotion at a time. One unanswered message at a time. One night, crying into your pillow with no reply at a time. You hated yourself for it, for feeling so weak, for caring so much, for letting them still live inside your head, even after they left, without looking back. And oh, the rage. It burned beneath the sorrow like a sleeping volcano, because while you were shattering, they were smiling, posting, laughing, living like they didn't just wreck you, living like you never mattered. And that rage, it scared you, because it was loud in a way your sadness wasn't. It had teeth, it had fire. It made you want to scream at the sky until your lungs tore open, made you want to smash mirrors so you didn't have to see what they broke. You wanted revenge, not out of hatred, but because you hated how powerless you felt, because you gave so much and were left with so little. The world didn't stop to ask what happened to you. It just kept moving, like your breakdown was invisible, like your suffering was too inconvenient to witness, and so you sank deeper, quieter, colder. People called you different. They said you changed. Of course you did. How could you not change after that kind of betrayal, after that kind of abandonment, after loving with all your soul and being treated like nothing? They didn't see the nights you sat with your fists clenched just to feel something. Didn't see you walking past bridges wondering, what if? Didn't see the bathroom floors that caught your tears like altars to the pain they gave you. You didn't want to die, but you didn't want to feel any more either. Not like this. Not this hollow ache. Not this weight on your chest every morning, because every sunrise felt like a punishment. Another day of pretending, another day of silence, another day of not being enough. But here's the truth. You weren't too much. They were too little. You weren't broken. They were blind. You weren't weak. You were just wounded. And the darkness, it didn't destroy you. It revealed you. It showed you what's left when the world walks away. It showed you the depth of your own soul. It showed you how long you could survive without applause, without validation, without anyone holding your hand. It showed you that even at your lowest, you still existed, and that matters, because even swallowed by shadows, even consumed by grief, even when you questioned everything, you didn't give up. You didn't disappear. You stayed, and that's not weakness. That's resilience in its rawest form. You endured, Not because it was easy, but because something in you, something sacred, refused to die. They walked away. They replaced you. They buried you in silence, but what they failed to realize is that the darkness they left you in, it's the same darkness that builds warriors, that forges legend, that writes the first line in the story of a comeback so loud. They'll hear it echo for years. You're not done. You're becoming. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic movie moment, no music swelling, no sudden scream into the void. No one saw the shift because it was quiet at first, but something changed. The pain didn't leave.